Hi everyone, welcome to my podcast series Witches in Finland. Today I will skip the presentation. Please go back to episode 1 and you will find it there. My name is Sami and today I'd like to give you a brief analysis of Metamorphosis. That means the ability of witches, sorcerers and other magically empowered persons to transform themselves and other humans at will or against their will into animals. Today's main focus is in Lapland, in shapeshifters, beliefs and myths behind the witchcraft in Lapland. First, I will talk about concept of metamorphosis by using research of witchcraft trials. This will lead us to werewolves. You can never talk enough about werewolves, so I will talk shortly about them. Next, I will present some witch trial stories where witches of Lapland were involved, actually quite a few. Unsurprisingly, all this leads us to reindeers and deeper in the magical Lapland. In this episode, like in every episode, I will present one movie that has some connection to witches, and today it is The White Reindeer from 1952. You can find the link to the free movie from my Insta page. It is a Finnish movie and it was awarded in Cannes Movie Festival and got Golden Globe in the 50s. By using literature, I'm going to explain you the key elements of the movie, those that have some connection to the real Sami culture and Sami witches. Surprisingly, there has been witches in Lapland even after World War II, and I will use interviews of these witches as a source material too. And finally, we will put this all together in a witches pot, and I'm going to pick up some things back up and connecting them to the psychoanalytical theories. I try to talk briefly also from the other point of views about the movie White Reindeer, because I believe this topic is probably most interesting to the students and professionals of psychoanalysis, feminism, folklore and others in the field of cultural history studies. But I recommend this last part also for everybody. You can learn something about yourself and your fellow human beings. In the end, there is again also a list of literature that I have been used today, but from now on I will only add new sources into the list. So if you want to find all of them, you will have to go to previous episodes or write to me if you are studying this area. I remember how my father told of his childhood years in Lapland. He said that children were terrified by stories of wolves, so that the children would not go to the woods. However, the real reason was mines. It was time when World War II was just ended, and after the retreat of the Germans during the Lapland War, for example, there were vehicles everywhere, and the boys were amused by, for example, squatting the front of the car with your thumb just for the funny noise. My father realized later that this was very dangerous play because there could be booby trap bombs in the cars. There have always been such stories in Lapland, in the wilderness, where demons who drink blood and eat your brains. This was probably also one way to keep children close to home. Fairy tales often have some moral aspect or lesson.
Witches.
Maybe in addition to this episode, you also want to learn more about totem animals. After putting on the mask, the shaman often received the powers of an animal. Seldom people want to be rats, pigs, or ants in their fantasies. Witches' familiars are usually nocturnal animals. Who doesn't want to be Batman, Catwoman, Spider-Man, or some other superhero? They are almost immortal because they have supernatural powers. They can beat the death like skillful witch. Reindeer may not seem very powerful, but when I have gone hiking, it is quite amazing to see how fast they run in rocks up to the Arctic hill. According to Heikkilä 1969, already Augustinus considered the transformation of humans into animals in his book De Civitate Dei, the city of God. He came to the conclusion that the demons could not create anything new, only to present a false image to the human senses. Demonologists have come to the same conclusions. In Kramer's and Sprenger's Witch's Hammer, Malleus Maleficarum, for example, Augustinus and Canon Episcopi, which is a book from about year 900, are quoted and examples are taken from the folklore and famous myths, such as Odysseus when Circe changed his men into pigs. The canon law is a law of the Catholic Church. It is a little bit confusing that myths and fables are presented as if as historical evidence to be pondered. I will quote the Witch's Hammer. Therefore, we can say for the present concerning any visions like that were caused to be seen by the devils in assumed aerial bodies like flying birds, or else that other natural birds were caused by devils to represent them. So, the end result is that only God can create beings. Demons can at most change their appearance or present illusions. However, the next chapter in Malleus Maleficarum discusses the case where women in the form of cats attacked a man and became beaten by him. The whipper was initially arrested for assaulting women, but was released when the plot of Satan was understood. It was even then that the demons moved the women. They were demonized. This happened in Strasbourg, Germany. According to Levack 1987, Metamorphosis was popular witch belief, but it was never fully integrated into cumulative concept of witchcraft, even it was closely related to flying. The belief that humans could change their shape was present in popular culture from earliest recorded times and still exists today. In certain areas of Europe, especially in heavily forested regions, a number of werewolves were convicted as witches. Near Finland, several witch cases are known from Livonia, in which werewolves played a major role. Heikkinen estimates that the combination of these stories with witch trials was due to a long folk tradition. As Stephen Gullibert 2012 has stated, the wolf is a symbol of the destructive forces of man, which all other animals and mystical beings may have carried. As we have also seen, the wolf is also a victim of these projections and our fears. Shamanism is a familiar tradition to Finns, but according to Nenonen 2006, Elsewhere, it has only just begun to be emphasized that shamanism is at the heart of the witch sabbatical stories everywhere. In Finland, traces of shamanism have survived longer than in many countries. Shamanistic tradition includes the belief that man can at least transform his soul into an animal. Eilola approaches the theme of metamorphosis by considering the origin of the words associated with witchcraft. During the witch trials, Finland was part of Sweden, from which the term troll was used in the witch trials. The word troll was used to describe all kinds of demonic beings. In Finland, however, the word was used in the same form of trulli. It was believed that trulli, can also take a non-human character. In the witch trials of Sweden, one woman had appeared in the character of magpie, or some other smaller bird also. Birds and flying were much on discussions in the trials. Eilola emphasized that this was based on the Scandinavian tradition of belief that at the moment of death, the human soul flies out from his mouth in the form of a bird. However, according to Eilola, Finnish folklore seems to lack the witch's ability to change his shape or form. The legal protocols support this point of view. In the Lapland, situation and tradition was different. According to Nenonen and Kervinen 1994, there is only one case in the whole history of witch trials in Finland where a witch from Lapland was accused. This happened in the 17th century. To be more exact, the trial started in 1671. One priest and one church warden were accusing a man named Aikio Aikionpoika, who in that time was already 80 years old. The charge was for murder by witchcraft. The victim had asked this Aikio Aikionpoika to conjure himself a good fishing fortune. But after that, he had not paid for this. It so happened that the man drowned on his fishing trip. When Aikio Aikionpoika was drunk, he bragged for the men of the church how powerful witch he was. He could not even remember this in a trial. He had used his witching drum and singing for the fishing fortune, and he had added later also he used drum in the murder. Man died 2 years after that. I have to say that this has been quite common accident in those big rivers where fishermen are fishing the salmon. Aikio said in a trial that he had learned this skill from his father, who also was named Aikio. He was singing bad words when he wanted to do something bad, and good when he had good intentions. In the top of the drum, part was decorated like heaven and low part more like hell, so you had to just to drum the metal discs so that they move into the wanted sector. He was sentenced to death. But he died during the transport of the prisoners. Of course, it was said that he cast spell to himself to die before the execution. Okay, now I have explained the basics about what metamorphosis means. You can realize that even it was not always believed, it had some background connection to stories about witches. Lapland was in the 17th century still quite a remote area, and witch trials happened more in the populated areas. It would be easy to draw a hasty conclusion that in remote areas such phenomena as witchcraft accusations would be particularly unleashed. However, according to Nenonen 2006, the majority of witch trials took place near large cities. There are exceptions, such as the witch trials in northern Norway, in Vardø, but the accused were not Sami people, but mainly women from the fishing village. Turning our attention now to the movie The White Reindeer. Original name is Valkoinen peura, and peura does not mean reindeer, it is a wild deer. Movie was made in 1952 and it was directed by Erik Blomberg. It was also titled A Story of the Witch's Love. The film, based on Finnish mythology and Sami shamanism, is set in Finnish Lapland and centers on a young woman, Pirita. In the snowy landscape, Pirita and reindeer herder Aslak meet and soon marry. Aslak is devoted to Pirita, but it is also devoted to his job. He works long hours as a reindeer herder, sometimes away from home, meaning the time the newlyweds can spend together is necessarily short. This leads also to growing sexual frustration on Pirita's part. She contacts a local Sami shaman Tsalkkunilla and obtains a love potion from him. No reindeer herder will be able to resist you, she is promised. During his visit, she first becomes aware of her own magical abilities. She places her hand on the shaman's drum and makes a stone jump. Pirita's visit has a terrible cost. Pirita becomes a bloodthirsty shapeshifter who lures men out into the barren wilderness where she kills them. If you are afraid of spoilers, watch the movie first, but actually you will hear whole story in the beginning. We learn from the folk song that opens the film that Pirita was born as a witch, although she doesn't yet know this. The movie begins with the scene where her pregnant mother tries to escape from the wolves. She manages to deliver the baby girl into the world. The song is like myth. It tells her destiny at the same time when she is born. We are told that she is natural born witch and how she is going to change and die. Ei tiennyt isänsä kodossa miehellä hän mennessänsä, että oli noita synnyltänsä. Vatsassaan paha valta. Kermikän seidalle uhrasi Maddar ahkalle valkovasan, siitä peurana tunturiin juoksi, kunnes koitti hetki. Finnish language. Instructed by the shaman to kill the first living thing, she sees her pet reindeer that her husband have gave to her, and she goes to a seita. It's one big stone surrounded by antlers. Here she sacrifices. As the moon rises that evening, Pirita transforms into the white deer and visits a nearby secluded area known as Pahakuru, Evil Valley. Here, after being hunted by one of the Aslak's husband's fellow herders, she shapeshifts back into her human form and carries out the first of her killings, seductively sinking her fangs into the smitten man's neck. I'm not going to spoil movie totally, but you can perhaps guess what happens when I tell you that Pirita warns her husband, please do not try to catch the deer like the other men do. Promise me, please. Let's see what were the key elements in the movie White Reindeer from the witchcraft point of view. There are three main elements. The first is the use of a witch drum in conjunction with the magic singing, spells, and different powders. The second is sacrificing a reindeer for the Seita, that means a place of sacrifice. And the third, of course, metamorphosis or transformation into an animal. About the drum first. The witch's drum was usually an oval small drum covered with reindeer skin with some patterns drawn on the membrane. The drumstick, or rather the hammer, was made of reindeer bone, horn, or it could be also metal. Metal rings were placed on the top of the membrane and moved over the patterns. The witch interpreted the meanings of the patterns and guided the rings depending on where the intention was good or bad. Johann Schäferus was one of the most important Swedish humanists of his time. He published already 1673 a book, Lapponia. In this book you can find his drawings copied from the original drums. I can link these pictures in my social media. In the film, the witch sprinkled also powder on the pot that is called ruumiin multa. Ruumis is human body and multa means mold. Actually, it meant body parts such as small bones or even sweat that was collected from the body after it had been in the grave several months. This was very powerful poison. If you used only the sand or mold from the graveyard, it was much less powerful. Erik Terman, in his book 1940, has write whole chapter about this ruumiin multa. Perhaps this could be translated body wax or decomposition fluids. The legend says that this magic has come to Finland from Sweden. Oula Isko has been in a Kiruna area, Vittangi, I don't know how to pronounce it in Sweden, and learned that even the habit may be exported, it has also strong connection to Sami culture. Spirits of the dead were scared and everybody tried not to be touched with the dead. Even that time when the book was written, of course the graveyard were Christian, but the old beliefs were still strong. You could even say, according to Therman, that the evil spirits had more power than good spirits. Few of the stories may even have some humor, but most evil spells are very frightening actually. Ruumiin multa is most poisonous when it's taken from the skin of 8 months old body. This powder can be put in the victim's coffee, alcohol, or mixed in the cheese. Symptoms of the poison are severe stomach ache, and the pain moves to your lungs and strikes into your heart or brain. Usually you will come mad and then die. Scary stories. I can write more about them in my social media pages later. Back to the key points. Although the church cannot be considered the most guilty in witch trials or death sentences, the church was clearly to blame when the Sami religion began to be destroyed. According to Mirkka Lappalainen, particularly pastors destroyed the drums and also treated the Sami violently. Drums were burned. So, if you visit Finland and somebody wants to sell you a real witch drum, don't buy it. It's not real. But if you want to find real Seita, a place of sacrifice, that is possible. One of the remaining Seita places is Ukkos Island, Äijih. It's a rocky island in Lake Inari, reindeer was also the most popular sacrificial animal in Seita cult and other sacrificial rituals. If the matter was small, then there was no need for animal sacrifice. Johan Tori mentions the story of a powerful witch named Dobar, who even sacrificed children for the Seita, as he fought the curse of another witch. These stories can also be legends and ghost stories. According to Encyclopedia of Sami Culture, Risto Pulkkinen writes, the East Sami know the myth of Mjöndash, the deer man. The mother of his was a female shaman and father was a deer. He lived with his mother in a hut made of deer bones, and bloody river separated their hut from the human world. In home he was in human form and outside a deer. In this myth, Mjöndashi wanted an human wife, and they married and they became the ancestors of the Sami people. The white female reindeer has been the lucky animal of reindeer herders, the kind every owner had to have in their herd to guarantee reindeer happiness. Please find more in the Sami, a cultural encyclopedia. You can find it also in English. Next I'm going to talk about Stalo. The Stalo of the northern Sami was said to be the son of the moon. According to other sources, he was the husband of Atsek, the daughter of the moon. The legends say that Stalo was traveling in the sledge that was pulled by the animals of the forest. There are some children's songs where you are singing about them one by one. First was the most small one, mouse, ermine, etc. And then start coming Arctic fox, wolverine, lynx and bear. In the Christmas time you should clean around the house so that Stalo's sledge doesn't get stuck in your home. There should be also water prepared. If Stalo was thirsty, he could drink from there and not drink your blood. This way of singing, it's called joiku, and it's tradition of the Sami people. This joiku, this song, was made for a 12-year-old boy who was lost in the Arctic mountains and died. As Johan Tori writes, the oldest stories about the Sami are the stories that the Sami have told each other. In the Sami culture, healing and witchcraft in particular was more the job of men. Tori have described the ways to heal people. Tori writes that not all tricks are suitable for writing in a book that is read around the world. There are some secrets too. Typical remedies included various baths, bleeding, massage, drinking fluids, and spells. The frog was a powerful remedy for many sickness. Medical skills also included helping with childbirth. If the cures did not help, there was a reason to think it was a witch's work. The awakening movement, in Finnish herännäisyys or körttiläisyys, was very strong in Lapland. This was also mixed together with the old beliefs and got some very peculiar forms. If you were only half believer after the death, you stayed in the earth walking as a restless spirit. It is interesting from the psychiatric point of view how some people were then possessed by these restless spirits. The descriptions are quite similar when you're describing a person afflicted with psychotic delusions. Okay, it's nice to have you still with me. Now we have here about the movie and some cultural historical facts. As an historian, I have learned from famous Finnish historian Heikki Ylikangas that as one begins to interpret the material, you move further away from historical documents, making the work also more difficult. I also learned from psychoanalyst Pentti Ikonen that the others' case reports can be interpreted in endless ways. In my opinion, those films that have room to present a wide range of interpretations are interesting. In many horror films, nothing is left to the viewer to complete. I love movies like The Witch and The Silence of Lambs. They are scary also because your mind is doing a lot of work, the same way music works, theater and the other arts, also witchcraft. Now let's dive into the witch's melting pot. I have used writings of Antti Alanen also in this introduction to the analysis. Various approaches have been proposed when reviewing this film Valkoinen peura. The French writer Theocari was able to point out the connections of Valkoinen peura to the ancient Greek legend, the fates of Oedipus and Agamemnon, the former of which involves killing his father and the latter sacrificing the first creature to come. Fitted to these myths, Pirita is both a performer of the sacrifice and also a victim. The symbol reveals certain aspects of reality, the deepest that other means of knowledge cannot. The ancient magical, religious behavior of the human species reveals man's existential consciousness of the cosmos and of itself. The film has been compared to Cat People, of which there are two versions. Finnish writer Aino Kallas wrote the book Bride of the Wolf, and there is also a play and an opera based on that book, quite similar stories. There have been some disagreement concerning the feministic viewpoint in witchcraft research. Anne Ollila in 1986 in her book A Female Image of a Finnish Film in the 1950s states that in the movie Valkoinen peura, White Reindeer, the main character Pirita's story can be compared with medieval witch hunts. I quote, "When a woman is too beautiful and attractive in the eyes of man, she cannot be a normal woman, but must be a witch. She must, of course, be punished for her evil deeds, and in this case the punishment is death. In this way, her destiny takes on a highly symbolic significance, and it shows what happens in films for women who do not submit to the traditional role of women." Okay, I understand this point of view, and actually I have talked about it myself in my Finnish podcast when I was studying Marilyn Monroe movie Don't Bother to Knock, where she played a role of mentally ill woman. But in the light of recent research in witch trials, there is now more information about male witches, especially in Finland. According to Nenonen and many others, most of the witches that were in trials and at least half of the executed were men. So yes, this is the truth in the movies, but movies are also fantasies, not historical documents. There is still much considerable controversy surrounding this topic. I also have found some information about the creative process behind the movie script. If I have understood right, the star of the movie, Mrs. Mirjami Kuosmanen, worked very closely with her husband, who was the director, when the movie script was written. It is said that the director got the idea when he was talking about it with her wife in the borderline of the sleep. Together they made several trips to Lapland, and director have said that it is even impossible to separate what he did and what she did. Some other texts have been of the opinion that the film, on the contrary, once gives a woman an active role. Pirita does not accept the passive role to stay at home and wait for the husband. Director Blomberg studied Arne Runeberg's dissertation Witches, Demons and Fertility Magic in an interview in the movie magazine Elokuva Aitta. He quoted the statement even from the English professor Evans Pritchard, who clearly influenced the story of the White Deer. Man can do nothing if he or she is a witch. It is not his fault that he has magical powers. He can be quite ignorant of this ability and innocent of the operation of these magical powers. In this state of innocence, he can do wrong to someone by using his secret powers, but when once the power of the toxic forces he possesses has been established, he knows his abilities and begins to use them for the purpose of harm. Evans Pritchard did his main work among the African tribe of the Asande. It has also been stated that the subject of werewolves is quite foreign to Finnish folklore, and the subject of metamorphosis of the white deer is probably more international folklore filtered through the horror catalogue of popular culture. It is perhaps clear that I disagree with this point of view. It is possible that vampire fangs of Pirita are from popular culture, but also these stories are based on myths, folklore and history. On the contrary, I believe there would not be these great stories without the background. Our whole culture is just a thin layer on the top of its history. Now let's move to last part of my talk, which is about connecting these findings to psychoanalytical theory. So that the episode does not become too long, I would like to present a summary of the subject. Hopefully it will arouse the curiosity to find more. In England and Ireland, werewolf stories were also light entertainment where an unfaithful husband could justify his nocturnal absences with his curse of werewolf. Sometimes monsters are also real. Werewolves have been real killers like modern days serial killers. You may know Sigmund Freud's Wolfman case, where he interpreted his dream as a sign of castration anxiety, wolf in a dream can be like a reality that slaps you in the face. It penetrates in your safe place, home. Fear of the beast as an irrational, violent creature is perhaps more fear of the projected beast in oneself. The wild is not controllable. It is bound to the force of life itself. Accepting the persecutor as part of yourself can help deal with anxious feelings and dreams. I quoted Lopez, Aiskins and Jukka Pohjola. The forces of nature still represent uncontrollability, according to Erik H. Eriksson in his book Childhood and Society. For the Sioux Indians, magic has been the only way to control nature. Among Sioux Indians, a dream or sight was reported to a committee that provided guidance on the life choices or appropriate behaviors. Behavior similar to, for example, the Catholic confession, or why not therapy. In art, we can dive in these worlds like a shaman. However, once the experience is over, we can quite easily return to everyday reality, this place and this moment. When everyday reality is too difficult, we also tend to seek fantasy worlds. For others, an Netflix marathon is enough, another gets stuck in the drugs. I have worked with people who believe they are werewolves or even Christ. In psychosis, there can be very concrete and straightforward ideas like I'm a bad person equals I must be a devil, or if I do something special, I will save whole planet. The unknown raises the need for anxiety and control. We try to anticipate or even predict the future. Small kids often feel powerless, so it's helpful to be empathic to their lack of control over their lives. Even it can be also irritating if they use cat's voice instead of talking, or pretend to be lions whole week. Pretend play reflects the simultaneous emergency, processing and integration of the remarkable development advances, most especially the capacity to symbolize. In the movie Valkoinen peura, Pirita was perhaps not totally narcissistic. It was more a question of good intentions gone bad. She was lonely and felt abandoned, so she decided to do something about it, and she got more than she bargained for. This movie is much more interesting than most of the romantic movies from that era, because it starts where usually movies end. Man and woman get in love and get married. After that starts difficulties. And she does what couples so often do. Instead of talking to each other about these difficulties and longings, they try to find solution outside. Usually outside marriage, but this time from the magic. According to Gross 1995, in the case of female vampires, they are associated with masculine fears of castration, since their bodies epitomize the so-called vagina dentata, vagina with teeth. So we are talking about body of female monster. Maria Tatar writes in Beauty and the Beast classic tales about animal brides and grooms from around the world. Each story is basically an expression of anxiety about marriage and relationship, about the animalistic nature of sex and the fundamental strangeness of men and women to each other. Many fairy tales simply illustrate the basic human impulse, common across civilizations, to use stories to figure things out, like this one. Many of the stories in Tatar's anthology are initiation myths, tales that allegorize the various rituals of entering adulthood, like Bruno Bettelheim in his fairy tale book. In a story from Ghana, Tale of the Girl and the Hyena Man, a young woman declares that she won't marry the husband her parents have chosen. Often behind fairy tales there is also some moral lesson or warning. As common as cautionary tales aimed at informing girls of the dangers of the self-determination and the consequences of their unchecked curiosity are tales informing boys about the essential wildness of women. As Gilbert states, when brides are animals, they transform into efficient and dutiful housewives, but their animalistic nature remains within them. In the 21st century, the stories we tell have been technologically upgraded, although they still following the model of the tales in Tartar's collection. TV shows and movies are full of humans falling in love with elusive and untrustworthy robots, from Ex Machina to Westworld. In Westworld, William falls in love to Dolores, who finds her free will herself, but after that she turns herself a cold killer and destroyer of the world. Jungian analyst Aniela Jaffe in 1997 wrote about symbols in the art. The same symbols are repeating: stones, animals, magic circles. Before the same symbols were in masks, statues, hunters used these symbols to get their prey. In the dreams, animals are hunting us. Religion and art are very near each other. These themes related to basic human problems are also repeated in the art therapy works, and not least the alienation and masks of one's own body, according to Parland and Raitasalo, 1981. I will give the last word to Yrjö Alanen, who have wrote about schizophrenia. The most important part of fantasies is related to good and bad experiences. Good are satisfying and bad are frustrating. Experiences of oneself and the outside world. If a child is hungry and soon becomes nourished, it experiences its goodness and the goodness of the object as strong and enduring. If it's not nourished, the perception of the object wickedness and persecution intensifies, and thus the notion that its own anger is stronger than its love. Thank you for listening, and here are the references. Kramer and Sprenger, 1487, Malleus Maleficarum. I've used two translations, English edition 71 by Montage Summers and Finnish edition by Vesa Suomalainen. Sophie Gilbert, 2017 article, The Dark Morality of Fairy Tale. Erik Terman, 1990s edition, Noitien ja paimentolaisten parissa. Johan Turi, 1979, An Account of the Sami, Finnish edition. Marko Nenonen, 2006, Noitavainot Euroopassa, Witch Hunts in Europe, Part 1. Erik H. Eriksson, Childhood and Society, Finnish edition, 1962. Edited by Pekka Impiö, Susi Rajalla, 2001. Yrjö Alanen, 1993. Schizophrenia, Pentti Ikonen, 2000. Studies of Psychoanalysis, psykoanalyyttisiä tutkielmia. Finnish article about art therapy of the psychiatric hospital by Parland and Raitasalo, 1981. Aniela Jaffe or Jaffe, 1997. Symbols in the art. In the collected texts by Carl Jung and his followers about symbols. Maria Tatar, 2017, Beauty and the Beast. Anna Pasolini, Bodies That Bleed. And Our Projective Dance with the Wolf by Stephen Gallipeur, 2012. And also those which I mentioned only in the text. Once again, thank you and welcome again. Bye bye.